Hello, friends. Welcome to today's podcast. Phrasal verbs are crucial for English speaking. I know you're probably wondering, why are they so important? Well, imagine trying to understand a native speaker who says, "Let's catch up later," or "He took off suddenly." Without knowing phrasal verbs, these phrases might seem confusing. But once you get the hang of them, everyday conversations start to make a lot more sense and your own speaking sounds more natural. Think of phrasal verbs as little keys. They unlock fluency and help you navigate real-world English with confidence.
Hello, Karen. How are you doing these days?
Hey, Larry. I'm doing pretty good, thanks. Things have been a bit busy lately, but overall, I'm managing. How about you?
I'm good too. So, are you excited about this podcast episode?
Yes, absolutely, Larry. I'm really looking forward to it. I think this episode is going to be very helpful for people trying to improve their English. We're covering some really practical tips.
Plus, I'm excited to hear your take on some of these phrases. You always have such great examples.
Thanks, Larry. I appreciate that. You know, I really believe examples make all the difference. If you just learn the rules and don't practice using examples in your conversations, it's so easy to forget them. When you put these phrases into real-life sentences.
That's right. Do you have any favorite phrases or examples you're planning to share today?
Yes, I do. One of my all-time favorite phrases is bring up. It's so versatile. For example, you can use it in a sentence like, "I want to bring up an important topic during our meeting."
Wow, that's a great way to introduce a new subject. I love how versatile bring up is. Let's see some more examples. For instance, you could say, "She decided to bring up her concerns about the project in the team meeting." It really shows how you can use it in different contexts, like addressing issues or starting discussions.
That's great. Another example could be, "He always brings up interesting points during our conversations." That emphasizes how the phrase can be used to highlight contributions in discussions.
Many students might wonder why we use up in the phrase bring up. Why do we say bring up instead of just bring? It's a great question.
The word up adds a layer of meaning, suggesting that you're not just bringing something physically, but you're also introducing or raising a topic for discussion. For example, when you say bring up an issue, it implies you're elevating that issue to the forefront of the conversation. Without up, the phrase would lose that nuance.
Okay, the next phrasal verb is get along. This is a really useful one. It basically means to have a good relationship with someone. For example, you might say, "I get along well with my coworkers," which means you have a friendly and cooperative relationship with them.
You could say, "My siblings and I get along really well, even though we have our disagreements sometimes." This shows that despite occasional conflicts, there's an underlying bond.
Now we can move to the next phrasal verb, and our next phrasal verb is get away.
Absolutely. Get away is a versatile phrasal verb. At its most basic, it means to escape or leave a place, often when you're trying to avoid something.
Oh, like if I need a break from work, I might say, "I need to get away for the weekend."
Absolutely. That's a great example, Larry. Get away is perfect for talking about taking a break to recharge or escape from the daily grind. In fact, get away can be used in a few different ways, depending on the situation. Besides a weekend getaway, people might use it when they're trying to escape a stressful situation or even just to leave quickly. For example, "I need to get away from all this noise," or "Let's get away for a while."
right? Let me think of another example. How about this? Imagine you're at a party or gathering and things start feeling overwhelming or maybe just a bit too loud. You could say, I need to get away for a bit to step outside and take a breather. It's that idea of creating a little space for yourself.
I just need to get away from my desk for a few minutes. It's not a big trip, but it's a quick escape to clear your mind.
Now we can move to the next phrasal verb. And our next phrasal verb is take off.
Oh, take off is such a useful one. It's got a few different meanings, depending on the context, and they're all pretty common in everyday conversation.
The first meaning that comes to mind is when a plane leaves the ground. For example, the flight will take off at 9 a.m. It's used a lot in travel or transportation.
Exactly. Another way we use take off is to describe leaving a place quickly or suddenly. Like, if someone says, I have to take off now, they mean they need to leave right away.
And there's also the idea of taking off as in becoming popular or successful. For example, her new song really took off, meaning it became a big hit. It's amazing how one phrase can have so many uses, isn't it?
It really is amazing. Take off is one of those phrases that just fits so many situations. And the cool thing is, it's easy to understand in context. Another fun use is when we talk about removing something, like clothing. For instance, it's hot in here, so I'll take off my jacket.
Now we can move to the next phrasal verb, and our next phrasal verb is look after.
Great choice. Look after is a really important phrasal verb, especially when it comes to responsibilities. At its core, it means to take care of someone or something. For instance, if someone says, I need to look after my little sister this weekend, it means they're responsible for her and will be taking care of her needs.
You can also use it in broader contexts. For example, if you're talking about a pet, you might say, I always look after my dog when my friend goes on vacation. It emphasizes that you're ensuring their well-being.
And it can also apply to things like saying, can you look after my plants while I'm away? It shows a sense of responsibility, not just for people, but also for things we care about.
Absolutely. Another example could be in a workplace setting. Imagine you're assigned to manage a project and you might say, I'll look after the team's progress and make sure everyone is on track. I think the examples we talked about are enough. Let's talk about the next phrasal verb, put off. Let's talk about put off. This phrasal verb can mean to delay or postpone something, and it's a common one in everyday conversation. For instance, you might say, I keep putting off my dentist appointment because I don't want to go. It really captures that feeling of procrastination, doesn't it?
Another interesting aspect of put off is how it can also mean to discourage someone from doing something. For example, if you hear someone say, the high prices put me off from buying those shoes, it shows that the cost made them less interested.
Absolutely. You could say, the long lines at the coffee shop put me off from going there in the morning. It's interesting how this phrase can quickly communicate that something doesn't seem worth it anymore.
Imagine you're planning a trip, but the prices are really high during peak season. You could say, I wanted to travel in July, but the expensive flights put me off. In this case, it means the high cost discouraged you from going at that time.
Now we can move to the next phrasal verb, and our next phrasal verb is come across.
Great! Come across is such an interesting phrasal verb. At its core, it means to find or encounter something by chance. For example, you might say, I came across an old photo album while cleaning my room, which means you discovered it unexpectedly.
It's such a versatile phrase. For instance, you might be reading a book and say, I came across a word I didn't know, meaning you encountered it by chance. It's perfect for those little discoveries in everyday life.
Another example could be when talking about how a message or idea is perceived. For example, you could say, the speaker came across as very passionate about the topic, which means they appeared genuinely enthusiastic.
Imagine you're shopping at a thrift store and you say, I came across a vintage jacket that was exactly my style. Here it means you found something unique by chance, one of those unexpected surprises.
Let's talk about your essay. What's holding you back?
I don't know where to start. It's like my ideas are jumbled up.
What's the main topic you want to focus on?
Social media's impact on mental health, but there's so much to say.
True, it's a broad topic. Have you narrowed it down?
Not really. Should I pick just one aspect?
Exactly. Maybe focus on something specific, like its effect on teenagers.
That makes sense, but even then, there's so much to cover.
Try breaking it into smaller parts, like start with the positive effects, then the negatives.
Okay, but how do I connect everything?
Transitions, use them to guide your reader. Do you know what I mean by transitions?
Sort of, like linking sentences.
Yes, and linking paragraphs too. Phrases like on the other hand or in addition.
Got it, but what if I get stuck on a section?
Skip it, move to the next idea and come back later. Writing doesn't have to be linear.
That's helpful. What about the introduction? It's always the hardest part.
Save it for last. Start with the body. Once you know your main points, the intro will come easier.
Okay, but how do I make it interesting?
Begin with a hook, something surprising, a question, or a statistic. Draw them in.
Like, did you know social media increases anxiety by 20%?
Perfect. That grabs attention right away.
I feel like I can do this now, but what about my conclusion?
Summarize your points and leave your reader with something to think about. A strong closing.
Like, it's up to us to decide how much power social media holds over our lives.
Exactly. That's a powerful takeaway.
I feel like the hardest part will still be making it flow naturally.
It's normal to feel that way. Have you ever read your work out loud?
No. Why?
It helps you catch awkward phrases or sentences that don't connect well.
Really? I've never thought of doing that.
Try it. If something doesn't sound right, revise it until it feels smooth.
Okay, but what if my paragraphs are too short or too long?
That depends on the idea you're discussing. Each paragraph should focus on one main idea.
What if one idea needs more explanation?
Then break it into smaller parts. Use subpoints to make it easier to follow.
I think I'm scared of sounding repetitive.
Repetition isn't always bad. Reinforcing key points can actually strengthen your argument.
But how do I avoid saying the same thing in the same way?
Use synonyms or rephrase. For example, instead of saying social media harms mental health twice, you could say it takes a toll on emotional well-being.
Keep asking yourself, does this support my main point? If it doesn't, leave it out?
That's a good way to stay focused. Should I also include statistics?
Definitely. Data adds credibility. Just make sure to explain what the numbers mean.
Okay, but where do I put the statistics? At the start of a paragraph.
Not always. You can weave them in naturally, like supporting evidence for your argument.
What about quotes? Should I add those too?
If they're relevant, yes. Just make sure to explain why they're important.
So I shouldn't just drop them in without context.
Exactly. Always connect them to your point. Otherwise, they'll feel out of place.
I feel like I'm getting the hang of this now, but how do I make my writing stand out?
Use vivid language and examples. Instead of saying social media affects people, show how it affects them.
Like describing a specific scenario.
Yes, like a teenager comparing their life to influencers online, it makes your writing relatable.
I'll try that. What about my tone? Should it be formal or casual?
That depends on your audience. Who are you writing for?
Mostly my teacher, I guess.
Then aim for formal but approachable. Avoid slang, but don't make it overly complicated.
Okay, and if I get stuck again?
Take a break, step away, clear your mind, and come back with fresh eyes.
I usually try to push through, but it gets frustrating.
That's why breaks help. Writing is a process. It's okay to take your time.
You're right. I think I've been putting too much pressure on myself.
It's normal to feel that way. Just remember, progress is more important than perfection.
Thanks, I feel a lot better about this now.